Good afternoon. For those of us that have made it here finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Rocky Roland, who's become one of our most prolific presenters of the last couple of years, maybe?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
A varied background, government, foreign service, military service. But today he's here to talk about what is a conscience and how do we get one, and how do we know what we know? How do we know right from wrong? I'm sorry. And you ready, Rocky?
I'm ready.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. After that technologically adept start, now see, it's a good thing. Here comes Hilberg wandering in at his typical time, 1.2 minutes before the start of the thing. So this should be very interesting. And one of the things I found, and I've done similar kinds of things and talk about this, and as a little bit of background, I used to teach adult Sunday school. I taught for like 12 or 14 years. You know, it's hard to believe, isn't it, Judy? You know me. You said, how that man's been in a church? That's what she's thinking. That's what she's thinking. I know. And this is a lot of the stuff that you talk about, right and wrong, and how do you know it, and what do you do, and how do you figure this out and do some things. And it's extremely complicated, and there's no right or wrong. So when you get going down through this to figure it out, because nobody knows. There's still all these psychologists and sociologists and theologists are all trying to figure this out still. They don't know the answers to this. So that makes this really hard to try to do a presentation like this, because there are, as you remember one I did recently, fact or crap. It's really hard to tell what's fact and what they're still working on here. Now, to give you an idea, you know me, normally I don't put sources up on here, but I look at lots of stuff whenever I do one of these presentations. And that book that's up there on the left is this one. And she's a neurobiologist that wrote this, and she's one of the leading experts now in the area of morals, ethics, and biological contributions to that, not strictly mental. And so I read that book. These two books I used years ago when teaching Sunday school, and it's the 10 Commandments twice removed and the 10 Commandments from the backside. And there's a whole series of from the backside books. If nobody's ever heard of them, I got most of them. They're really cool as far as giving you a look at the Bible or things that are studied in the Bible from a totally different perspective than you're used to. So I use that. And then see that other list. This folder here has about half of the articles that I read in order to do this. Those are the only ones that I printed, and there's more of them. So you can see that it's a lot of stuff, and unfortunately, they don't agree in most cases when you're going down through here. So this is where we're coming from. Definitions, and I put there, kind of. Mean that because they can't agree. The experts in these fields cannot agree what the actual definitions are. So I picked the ones that I liked after reading all these different sources that seemed to make the most sense to me. And that's my caveat, kind of, because that's the ones I picked. And a conscience, you can see, and the key word there is inherent capability. That means we all have it. Every single human person has this, the ability to perceive right and wrong and evaluate them and then decide what to do. Now, morals come after conscience, and morals are beliefs and conceptions that we build up over a period of time. They're not, and your conscience also, it's mostly when you're young, and we'll get into that. And morality is just a different form of word for morals. In other words, it's the encompassing term that talks about your actions or society's actions based on the morals in place. And then ethics, we're also going to talk about, and ethics essentially are written down. Those are things that are written down. They're a code. Many, many professions have them, the medical profession, the legal profession, accounting, business. All of these people now have codes of ethics, and they're supposed to govern your behavior and how you act. Now, what are these building blocks? So we're going to talk about this. The lady in the blue book who wrote this, the neuroscientist, her view is this is all evolutionary, and it comes back from a lot of animals and things. So show this thing called pro-social behaviors. And what that means is we try to get along with each other, and we consciously make decisions that are for the good of the group, not necessarily for ourselves. That's pro-social. And we're going to talk more about that kind of a decision or that kind of a thought later. There's lots of different species and groups out there that evidence this pro-social behavior. Empathy is stronger on kin, family. We tend to have a stronger empathy, all of us too. Stronger empathy for family than other people that we know. And they do not require a conscious thought or decision by us. They just happen inside our brain. We don't think about it on the thing. And that's part of what we're going to think. Now, how do we get from these groups to humans? Why are we different? We're different because of our brain. We got 86 billion neurons in our brain, and the monkey with the most neurons, the type of monkey, has 6.5 billion. So you can see. So what?
Clearly, you're not sharing the slides. Didn't do screen share. These can't see it.
You can't see that slide?
That's what. Online.
Oh, online.
Yeah.
Oh,
Step one, turn on mic. Step two, share.
well, I didn't do any of this. I'll look to my online expert back there. So we're going to keep talking, and the online expert's going to make sure that we try to get this available to the Zoomsters out there. It says here you are screen sharing. It says that on my screen. The little green thing, it's not on theirs, it's below the bottom line of that, and it says you are screen sharing. Is somebody online, Ron? Watching? Well, nobody's whining, so usually they whine when they can't see. Oh, it's asking for the slides. Oh, okay. That's, I didn't see what's happening. Well, I don't know what to do because I only have a you are screen sharing and a stop share button. I'll let Ron keep working on it, and then I'll keep going. I'll go to Lisa. Lisa, I'll come to you and give it to you at your house. Honestly, I mean that. So we have a super sophisticated brain. That's what it boils down to. These having 8.6 billion by 6.6 billion, that's just not a thing. That's a logarithmic difference because it's 10,000 times for each additional neuron. So that slope of brain capability is not like this compared to 6.5. It's like this compared to 6.5. What that means is there's absolutely no comparison between human brains and any other species. Okay. This is the continuation of our special brain. We have ability to categorize things. We can put them into groups. We can associate them so we can look at things and say, oh, they belong in this group. It helps us make decisions. We can think in the abstract. We can form images of things that aren't there. No other species can do that. That's what makes us special. We can imagine things that are not there, not present. We can anticipate the future and plan for it. That's another big, big step. And then we're aware of death. No other species does that. That's not really part of our talk today, but maybe we'll have one of those one day. And we can make value judgments. What's right or wrong? That's a big difference there. So now you've got this thing called human culture. And that whole circle of things there goes into what makes up culture. And every one of those things then contributes into our brain and into our conscience and how we make our decisions. So culture is a huge, huge contributor into how we make decisions. So now that we know we have one of the most powerful brains out there, if not the most powerful brain, we're going to go into what is conscience inside our brain or things, and then we'll go on from there. Now it's a really difficult thing because there's a difference between conscience and consciousness. And there's a big debate. All these people who study the brain in human beings, they have no idea what consciousness is. How do we get to walk around and know all? Nobody knows. It's still a mystery how we can do this stuff, how we can walk around, how we are conscious, how we are human. That nobody knows. Conscience, however, is a little bit of subset of that, and that's this business about right and wrong. It's moral knowledge, and it's shared with yourself. That's inside you, inside each individual person. Now, that does not mean that there cannot be outside sources of your morality, and that's one of the reasons we're going to talk about theology and religions, because those are heavy, heavy contributors to people's moral judgments and conscience, is if they are exposed to or adhere to any particular religion. Now, this is, I put these, just leave this up for just a couple of minutes to read these two kind of quotes. But a conscience oftentimes is referred to as that still small voice inside that tells us what to do. And these are two references where that concept is kind of alliterated. And of course, most of us have heard some of this from the biblical reference. And then this other poem's pretty famous too. Famous poem. That's conscience. How do we do this? When do we do this? Well, human babies are responsive to the things around them at birth. By 3 months old, they start to respond to good and bad puppets. So if they are shown puppets that do events, and one of the puppets does a bad thing and a good thing, they can see that. They recognize that. No one knows how. They don't have any idea where that sense of good comes from in them. By 12 months, they understand fairness. Who cuts the cake and who chooses the first piece, right? That's fairness. They understand that by the time they're 12 months old. By 2 years old, they're starting to develop empathy. This is the fact that, 2 years old, terrible twos, they won't share their toys with anybody, right? Except when they do. And they can start at that time to understand how their reactions contribute to other people's ideas. And so you can, by the time they get to be teenagers, however, they go into this stage called empathy fatigue. And a lot of us have been in that too. We just get tired of other people and doing these things, and nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to get we're really doing this for them. And so that's how one of the reasons that teenagers change their behavior. And then the other biggest thing, peer pressure. And we've all heard and studied and know about peer pressure and how important it is. Well, it's hyper important to teenagers, much more so than any other group. And so they go from getting their subconscious training from their parents and family to their peers when they're about 13 years old. 13 to 16, families out, peers in. This is another way of looking at this. This has been the standard view of how this happens for the last 100 years, until this lady came along that wrote the neuroscience book, and she's kind of questioning some of these things. So parents, you're still the external conference. They learn by repetitive actions, repetitive learning. By 6, they start to have a moral conscience. By 9 and 10, they understand the laws and they understand retaliation. That's a big thing. By 9 and 10 years old, they understand the word retaliation. And 9 to 10, they're motivated because they want people to like them. And we never lose that. We all want people to like us. And then they understand, although they may not always look like it, that structure and rules are required outside the family. 12 to 13, they shift from these concrete rules to abstract. They become more future-oriented. They start to understand consequences. This is the first time they really start to understand consequences of their actions. Then they start to look at the complexity. They start to go back and forth, to vacillate in their views, and then the peer pressure once again starts to take over. Now, what are cultural norms? How does that fit into this? Look at these kind of things. Cultural norms, those are specific groups. You can start very big. The United States, Germany, France, there are national cultural norms. There are, inside our area, we have a Polish community, there are Polish cultural norms. How marriage partners are chosen, attitudes towards other, alcohol consumption, etc. Those are all established inside your community and by your things. And then there's these things called folkways, mores, and taboos. And this is how these things are broken out. Folkways are norms, but they're not strictly enforced. People know about them, but if they don't follow them, we kind of shrug our shoulders and say, oh, well, okay, that's just spread. Mores are more essential to our core values, and we tend to take some kind of social action. And then taboos, when you go against those, you tend to get punished. Yeah, see, look at this. These are folks. Don't put food in your mouth with a knife. Don't American flag to touch the ground. Shake hands. Don't push people waiting in line. Don't pass gas in public. Those are folkways. Those are things you just learn. Now, if any of you know me, I've traveled lots of different places, more than 100 countries. These things don't apply in other countries, not in every country, all right? Of course, the American flag, no. Shake hands, no. Never. Half the country, the rest of the countries in the world, they would never shake hands when you meet someone. It's not, don't do it. They don't do it. Push people while waiting in line. We have an unusually severe impression of our own personal space. We don't want people invading our personal space, and that's why you don't push people in line. 50% of the rest of the world doesn't have that. They have no sense of personal space like we do. So lines are different there than they are here. Exactly right. Elbow the kid over the fence when he tries to go by you in the ski lift line. That's the kind of stuff. Mores are a little more strict. Lying. There's no real penalties, no police state lying, but there are consequences. Doing drugs, same-sex marriage, gossiping, all these things that are on this page are mores. Now, we tend to take our actions and our thoughts when these happen more seriously. Plagiarism, laughing at a funeral, all of these kinds of things. But is there any real punishment? Not usually. Maybe a little bit of ostracizing sometimes when you see this happening. But then you go to taboos. And these are so strongly held that there's almost always some kind of punishment associated with them. And these are what really get ingrained in your brain, that go into your conscience, that make up your own personal idea of what's right and wrong, but you get them from an outside source, and usually from your culture. They're also been written down. How many of you remember Hammurabi's laws, or the term Hammurabi's law? Nobody heard that when you were a kid studying? Yeah, a couple people. That was the first known case of laws and things being written down. They aren't on a block of stone, but they were written down in what, 1792 BC. The first code of ethics in the law, mostly thought to be divinely inspired. Most had to do with business. They had to be how you conduct your business, and penalties were in there. For the eye for an eye was the first time that showed up in any written documents. And those were religious, but we're more familiar with Christianity and other religions. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. When the most stringent part of your morality comes from religion, it's called religious authoritarianism, or the divine. And it requires a supernatural being. So there's some religions out there that don't qualify. We call them religions. They're not really, like Buddhism is not a religion because they don't have a deity. There is no deity in Buddhism. It's a way of life. It's a sense of duty and things you have to do. So Buddhism is not a religion. If there's no deity, it's not a religion. But we often label some of these social contracts as religions. Religions and some of these others rely on a thing called reciprocal altruism. What is that? Anybody figure out what that means from those two words? But what's altruism? Doing the right thing. Doing the right thing for no particular reason. It's just because it's right. That's altruism. And then reciprocal means do it to somebody else because it's right. And what? They'll do it. If you're good, and you both will be good to each other. Now, does that work? No. And so we're going to talk some of that area. Religions rely on group loyalty. How many would think that based on religion or religion they've been associated? Was there a group loyalty? Very strong, right? In almost all religions, a big tenet of any particular sect or division of a religion is group loyalty. Authority and respect? Yep. Purity and sanctity? Oh, it's a concept. And now, this is a little hard to read, and you can kind of take a look at the white block up there. But this gives you an idea of some countries around the world and the religions that are most important, most pervasive inside those countries. And so you see some of them are other, some of them are nothing. So it can give you an idea of where these cultures get their mores and taboos from inside these religions. I think one, the top left of the slide there where it says morality is doing what's right regardless of what you told, and religion is doing what you're told regardless of what is right. Now that's an interesting quote, isn't it? And then Lama has his, he thinks that world religions can really be affected. One of the things you come across every time when you start studying ethics, right, wrong, and I've taken a bunch of classes in this, is this quote from Socrates. And it's not necessarily the quote, but it's the idea that he put forth in this, and that is what God says good because God said it? Or did God say it because it's good? And you spend about 2 years studying that statement when you're studying ethics and morals, because that's a big deal conceptually on what that happens. Now, most of us here are most familiar with Christianity, so that's why I'm going to focus on it mostly. Source of conscious ethics and morals in Mosaic law, that's Moses. That's the Old Testament part of the Bible. Most of these things are offenses against God. Most of them, as it turns out, came from where? Hammurabi, Babylon, they all existed before. All of those things were written down a long time, hundreds and even 1,000 years before Moses. The concepts that were in the Mosaic Law and in the Ten Commandments had already been written down. Now, how many commandments? Oh, I already spoiled it. How many commandments in the Bible? No. 613. 613 is thou shalt or thou shalt not in the Bible. Now, we had the big about those, but there are another 600 or so, yeah, mainly in Leviticus and Deuteronomy in the Old Testament. And there are things like don't eat meat of cloven hoofed animals. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of other things. In Christianity, what is wrong initially, we have this concept of the fall from God, the original sin, the concept of free will. This is interesting because we're talking about conscience and making decisions. The Greeks had no term, no word for free will, had no concept for it. And yet they were the ones that had probably the most open discussion about the use of free will of any society that ever existed. So that's pretty interesting. Now here we are, the 10 Commandments, another 621, and then the New Testament, the Beatitudes. Okay. Usually when you're studying ethics in college or in any formal courses, it's the 10 Commandments and the Beatitudes. And you spend about 6 or 8 weeks on each set of those. There's 2 sets of the 10 Commandments in the Bible, one in Deuteronomy and one in Exodus. And the Catholics and the Protestants, hard to believe, have a different view and an order of what these are and how to enforce them and what they really, really mean and what's more important, because that's based on the order. But really what's important to us, first 3 or 4 are things you should do, like only have one thing, things you should do. And then the last 6 or 7, depending on it, are thou shalt not, things you should not do. So you get some things you should do, and you get some things you should not do in the 10 Commandments. And then, of course, there's never any agreement, and this is just the Catholic and Protestant disagreement. There's other Old Testament law. Here's some of those things out of Leviticus. Don't have 2 kinds of crops in the same field. Don't wear clothes made from more than one fabric. Don't cut your hair or shave. Those are all thou shalt nots. These are commandments. Equal weight as far as anyone else would know when you're reading the Bible. There's nothing that says, oh, these are the ones. Nothing says that in the Bible. We say that. We've made that way. These are just as important, theoretically. If a man lieth, here's one that everybody who's against homosexuality quotes out of the Bible. If a man lieth with another man, both must be killed. There's one other kind of reference in the Bible to homosexuality, but this is it. This is the only thing. Well, if you buy that, you have to buy every one of these other ones too, right? I mean, can't just pick that one out and say that that's a good one and then wear clothes made out of wool and polyester. That's not happening. You know? So, yeah. Deuteronomy is a little different. Focuses more on God. Yo, Mike.
These Bible quotes that you gave us are kind of all out of context. And sometimes when you take them out of context and only quote a little bit, you sometimes don't see what's before and after.
That's true.
Do these things have more explanatory beginnings and endings than what the
Not
sense
really.
activities see?
There, if you go through the 600 and so, it just starts with and it goes. And it just says, here is the law. And away you go. There's really no more explanation or things. And so it's, I mean, I agree with you 100%. People, actually, and I forgot this, I wish I could remember, there's a word for picking a particular verse out of the Bible and making that to make your point and stand on without including everything else that's in the Bible. There's a word for that. I don't remember what it is, but there's a specific, yeah, it's like cherry picking. only it's a real word. And so yeah, that's one of my most unfavorite things, is that people or anyone picks individual verse out of the Bible and then says, this is thing. And then if you give them the polyester and wool thing, they don't want to hear it. You know, they don't want to hear that you can't eat shellfish and you can't eat cloven hoofed and you can't eat deer.
And how many years did it take to accumulate these 612?
Yeah, nobody knows that. See, that's the other, and the other thing is everything was different in 1700 BC. So that's part of it. Now, in the New Testament, for those of you who know anything about the New Testament or have studied this, there's a book of James. All the other books in the Bible say that you're saved by grace. You don't have to do good things. You don't have to be right. Right in the correct of right and wrong. And James in his book says, oh, wait a minute. You can't just say, oh, Jesus died for my sins and there's all this grace and something. You got to actually walk the walk here and talk the talk. You got to do right things. And this is why James chapter 2 is called the morality chapter in the New Testament and in the Bible. And he does these things: no favoritism, don't judge rich and poor, no discrimination, love your neighbor as yourself. You're judged by the laws, but it gives you freedom to act. Okay? You're judged by the law, but it gives you freedom to act. So act. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Faith and actions work together. That's James. I'm just throwing these out there so you guys can work on this stuff later. When I took my first ethics course in college, we spent half of the semester on the Beatitudes. That's how important I think these are as far as guidance. These are what? These are things you should do, not things you should not do. These aren't prohibition. These are things you should do, right? Poor in spirit, they're good. The meek, be meek. Merciful, be apart, be a peacemaker. These are. And we get, now you got to remember, and this is the point that Mike's picking up, and also over here, is this thing started in 1700 BC. Some people say as far back as 4000 BC for the Genesis and Mosaic books. Came forward, New Testament in 100 AD or so, when it started coming in, and we're still now 2,000 years from that. 2,000 more years we've had all these things in existence. Well, for Christians and things, most people probably, this is not true in all cases, but probably some of the most important people, St. Augustine was probably the most influential person in the early Christian church that talked about morals, ethics, and person, the idea of a person inside the church. Luther and John Calvin, they were pretty much contemporaries at the same time. They saw the similarity between morality and conscience. God's will is the one, versus wrong, and the responsibility, if you practice freedom, the responsibility to act morally. And then modern Christian ethics gets confusing because of something like Mike brought up, but you have context, you have conflicts between this verse and these verses in the Old Testament and New Testament. And so now you get more and more confusion. Doesn't matter. The biggest contributor to morals and ethics in the United States is Christianity and religion. No doubt about it. The number one contributor to our basis, our concepts, our things, without a doubt, the biggest contributor. Hey, remember this? Yeah. What would Jesus do? What's that? It's a conscience statement. It's a morality statement. It's what we, in other words, there's a decision to be made here between right and wrong. That's what you ask yourself. That's we've been talking about conscience and morals. Now we got ethics. It's usually rule-based, but it's not laws. It's usually associated with a profession or a set group of people who sign up to this when they join the group. You say, okay, I will follow these rules of ethics. It's possible for your morals to be more strict, right, than the rules of ethics of your profession. You could have different moral rules and a different conscience, but you're in big trouble if your ethics are more strict than yours. Because then what are you doing? You're beaming around inside the organization doing things that are in conflict with what they say and what you signed up to do. So you gotta there depending on who's holding the moral high ground. Anybody ever heard that before? Let's hold the moral high ground on the things. Well, that's a hard thing to do, right? Because what? Because we're saying what's right and somebody else is saying what's right. And somebody else is saying what's right. And every individual has a impression of where that high ground is. And so that leads us then to justice. Now we've got the conscience, which is that still small voice. We've got morals, which is this list of things that we believe may be right or wrong. And then we introduce this stupid term called justice. What's justice? Well, it kind of goes back to the 2-year-old and the piece of cake, right? What's fair? Justice really boils down to our conception of what is it an equal punishment or an equal reward that matches what deed or task was done? Was that just or not? That's back to the old 2-year-old thing, and we look at that and we have and that comes all the time, every day we make those kinds of decisions. Morals take a long range view. That's an important concept of this. Morals are not the here and now, what's right now. This is, we see the reactions we take of what's going to happen in the future. So if I treat somebody right, what's going to happen in the future? Remember this reciprocity, the reciprocal altruism. If I treat them right, what's going to happen in the future? They're going to treat me right. That you have to believe that. You have to believe that if you're going to act in a right way. And if you don't believe that, then you're going to get pushed into a smaller circle in how you choose to behave. So you have to truly believe that when you're dealing with people and you do the right thing, that you're going to be responded that way in the future. And that's why we do that. We very rarely make a decision based on what's happening right now. It's all about what's going to happen in the future. And this leads us to this word called trust. And everything that we do as humans, but everything as we do in our society is based on trust. Every single thing. There's not, yeah, go ahead, Mike. Oh, there's no other thing. I'm thinking the other day, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a program on money. What is money? Yeah, what's money? What's a dollar bill? Nothing. It's a stupid piece of paper, right? It's nothing. It's trust in the fact that I can use this to do something. I can do something with this. I trust that when I pull that out and put it on somebody's counter, they're going to take it. Is it worth anything? No. It's worth nothing. Except they trust that they can then take that and go on and on and on. So money is really an interesting concept in trust that we all don't think about every day, but we could not, and that's a massive amount of trust when you think about it. When you think what we do every day, we put that card in there. That card. How much is that card worth? Who knows, right? That's trust by who knows how many different people. So that's what we're building up to in all of these ideas of conscience, moral. Is what we're trying to do is build this trust so we can live together as a group and have some idea that what we do is going to come back to us in a good way. And so trust that's the end game. We cannot do anything. And I like the one at the bottom left here. That's kind of my favorite thing. And it's the whole idea is that when you jump out there, somebody's going to catch you. You learn that as a grandchild, right? They learn that when you jump, you're going to catch them. You don't go, and let face plant, do you? No, you want to, what are you teaching? What are you teaching them when you do that? What's the one thing you're teaching them? Trust. Yeah, trust me. That is an exact example of things we do every day to build trust. You can trust me. When I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to let you fall and plant your face. Now, these are ethical dilemmas. We face these every day. We make a purchase at a local store, and instead of giving us a $10 bill and change, which is what we deserve, they gave us a 20. What do? Ethical dilemma, right? You receive a package of your home that was to your neighbor, but it's you can see from the packing label it's something you've been wanting for 6 months. What do? Neighbor changed their dog out in all kinds of weather. You like your neighbor, but the dog's dying. What do? Okay, here's one, and I told Tom about this morning. You're in the military, you notice that when you come into work and your boss comes into work from his home with his briefcase, this is very apropos now, right? Opens his briefcase, and what's on top of the briefcase? Top secret documents that he just brought in from home that he took home. What do? He's your boss. So we face those kind of things, and Tom knows what I did. That was me. That happened to me. My boss came in with top secret stuff in his, and I'm telling you, you don't get in a knife fight with the FBI if you're our rank. So I turned him in. I'll tell you what happened. Here's what happens to a normal person. He's a colonel. I'm a captain. Turned him into security people without telling you a lot more, but it was really serious. This is kind of like, I mean, this was really bad stuff to have taken home. Then the reason he took it home is there's a war planning thing, and it's a loose leaf binder type of thing. It's like this thick. And all the different plans, and so you can take these out and put the new ones in, and you don't have to reprint for a year. Change something, you just reprint pages and put them in. Well, he opened this up so he could take home the air pages, because by the end of the week we had to redo them for the coming year. They're top secret. But on this page, the cover page, the full page of that was with an Army unit, was the division nuclear fire plan. How we plan to use our nuclear weapons in Germany. in 1975. That's what he had here. That is something you don't take home and do the things. And so, and I'll tell you what happened. Here's what happens to a real person. They did it, security people, Air Force and Army, and even there's FBI agents overseas, all that. They come in one day, they figure it out, because what's he gonna do? It's still in his briefcase. And they figured out that he actually did that, took the thing. So they removed his security clearance that day. So the next day they removed his, well, now he can no longer get in the building. The building that we work in, you can't get in because you can't go in that building without a security clearance. So the Army gave him an office in the motor pool. So he could go to the office in the motor pool and read books until 2 months later, until his tour was up, and he went back to the US. And then he decided to retire. They didn't kick him out. He decided to retire because he was never getting a security clearance back. And so he was never going to get a job in the Air Force. That was the end. Yeah.
How do I hold this? My moral question there, if I had been in your shoes, was it with intention or not?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No, I mean, honestly,
Okay,
it doesn't matter. And this is the thing, and if you haven't dealt with that kind of information before, and this is that, if it wouldn't have been for that here, it wouldn't have been as bad, really. If it wouldn't have been for that page, because our page, and you know, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that's stamped top secret, but it's kind of not. But the problem is anybody who can't follow the security rules once, how many chances do you get? One. And everybody knows that, that's in the system. Everybody that's in the system knows that. If you screw up once, you're out and you're never coming back inside the security system. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the military or the thing. I'm talking inside the security system, because you have demonstrated you don't care. You don't care, and you can't be what? Trusted. You've lost trust. They've lost trust, and you can't get it back. You never get it back. So, and his excuse was, well, there's nothing in, and there wasn't in our part. There's nothing in there that's really top secret. And he's probably right in the Air Force part. But in the page here that was on the backside of our first page was the most highly classified page in that whole plan, was this one. And it was a map. And so that was what happened. And I've known over the course of, I've been a security officer, I've known over the course of my career, 20 people who intentionally, unintentionally, I mean, there are people that walk out, don't know they have it with them. Don't know they had, now he knew he had it. He took it home to work on it. So he didn't, and this is a thing, I mean, you know, how smart can you be when you say, oh, I didn't know that was on the other side. Really? How smart are you? You know, I mean, is that the person you want running your? There have been that have picked up something, a folder, and they didn't know that there was stuff in there that they shouldn't have had. But they get hammered just as bad. Why? Because they should have known. Because it's your responsibility to know. That's my top secret classified something or other story. There's always three versions of the truth, right? Always three versions of the truth. And so this is what we deal with every day. That was Tom this morning. I took that one picture this morning, the Tom on the golf course. He birdied a hole. Yeah. And, but we do, you know, there's what? My truth, your truth, and the truth. Those are the three kinds of truth that are out there. And we deal with that every day. And that's why we have these dilemmas that we find ourselves in. Here's the key thing. Here's what conscience is. Here's what morals are. Do the right thing, what? Even if no one is looking. Even if there's no one to check up on you. Even if there's no chance of anything ever happening, if you do the right thing, then you have ethics, you have morals. Now, there's a term that's very popular, been around a long time now, 34 years, called situational ethics. Anybody ever heard of that before? Yeah, Mike has. What is it, Mike? You remember?
It's good.
Yeah, it depends, right? Depends, yeah. There's no such thing as good or bad. It's what helps me the most today. What's good for me the most today? And what's the risk of getting? That's situational ethics, which is where we're at in a lot of instances and times now. We've gotten away, we as a culture in the United, I'm talking the United States because the only thing we know very well. Inside the United States, we've gotten away from this thing that there is such a thing as a right or wrong. We're in this thing is what's right now and who's going to see, who's going to know. If we do it this way and it works, no one will know. No one will know. If it doesn't work, what happens? You're out. I mean, if it's wrong. And then there's this thing called moral hypocrisy. And I said at the beginning of the thing I was going to talk about. What's that? What's moral hypocrisy? Saying one thing and what? Doing something else. That's moral hypocrisy. Moral hypocrisy is saying one thing and doing something else. That way we can do what? We can exploit the ethical wiggle room. Well, maybe if I kind of do it this way, I'm not really stepping all the way across the line. It's not near as bad. All right. We want to be socially accepted. All of us. That's peer pressure and social acceptance. So we tend to err toward moral hypocrisy. We don't tell our friend to stop that when they're doing the wrong thing because we want to keep them as a friend. We judge others more severely than we judge ourselves. Everybody believe that? If you don't, you judge yourself more severely than you judge others, then you have what? Ethics and morals. Very, 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 very hard. Remember the us and them thing back when we were talking about how people try to establish that when they want to change your opinion about something, they try to create two groups, us and them. And who do you judge more harshly? Them. It's always about them. It's never about us on the thing. So that's what this is saying. We always tend to judge other people more harshly. And this bottom one is especially true. Children have a built-in what? BS meter. We used to carry those in the Air Force. We used to, actually, I'll show you one. When we're talking like this and Mike would say something and I say, oh, that's BS in my head. Then you do this. What's that? What's that mean? It means save your watch. The BS is getting high. It's over my head. So if you see somebody in the room do this, that's what it is. Save your watches. Save your watch. BS is getting so can't. Children have that. Children have that. That's why by the time they're 13 to 15, what? They tune you out because you've been BSing them and you've been a moral hypocrite because they've seen you do stuff you tell them not to do. And it's always what you do. Always what you do that's remembered. Never ever what you told them. That goes, that's out right now. They don't remember that. So they're really, really good. And about 13, that kicks in full speed and they realize you've been BSing them the whole time. So here's the things that money can't buy. Manners, what's that? That's the first things that we taught, the Folkways there we talked about. Those are mostly manners and things, how we act on other people, using knives and forks properly, stuff like that. Morals, can't buy that. What's respect? Respect is what? A version of trust. Yeah, that essentially means trust. Character, common sense, trust, patience, class, integrity, and love. These are all things that are built up. What? Are any of those things real? Can you touch them, feel them, buy them, sell it? Nothing? No. All those things are right up here, just conscience in the right. And over a period of people and how they treat back. And we put that all together and that builds our character and our things. And how do you get somebody to say, wow, he's really got a good character? How does that happen? Because they see that person doing things they wish they would do. That's what happens a lot of times. You see somebody do something you wish you would have done. And you say, oh boy, that guy's really got some strength to do that. So we've talked about conscience, morals, ethics, and how we know right from wrong. Has anybody got any questions or comments or things here? Boy, that was easy. Yeah, well, that could be. Yeah. This is the only thing you're gonna now. Okay, stand here for 45 minutes. Tell you this, Evan, what are you gonna remember? That's it. That's the only thing that anybody's gonna remember. But yeah. Say, oh, and then what's he do? Oh, my wrist. No, he's just giving me a heart. No questions. Oh.
We used to have a lower threshold. It was pull up your pant leg.
That is a lower, but it's harder to see that.
No.
It's not, it's hard to
You're
see
standing in a group and
when you're in the front.
they knew what you're doing. Anyways, how would you compare, and a lot of this is based on Christianity, if you were looking at Muslim or other religions, is there anything significantly different?
Not in the Muslim example, there's nothing, honestly. If you, and I haven't read the whole Quran, but I've read a bunch of it. And I would say there's nothing different in how it built. Now it does build different things because statements, and just like Christianity, there have been times when there are sects or groups of Christianity who try to do the 631 commandments. And so you see them trying to live that life. Well, same thing in Islam. They have the equal number of these mores and commandments and things. And there are people who cherry pick. There are people who cherry pick parts of the Quran or Islam, and then they build their whole life on that. But inside the structure of Islam, I'd say there's no difference in right. Their concept and the Quran's concept of right and wrong is the same as the Bible's. Now Buddhism's different because, and Islam and Christianity both have a deity, happens to be the same one, And so if you have a deity, everything's different in your concept of morals and conscience, because you then believe that the concepts of right, wrong, and sin and things come from that deity. They are divinely presented from the deity. And then in that case, Christianity and Islam are the same. They believe that. Now in Buddhism, no, there's no deity, but inside their code of ethics, almost identical. Everybody's, except some of the animist religions in parts of Africa and things like that, where there are very small groups of people and very isolated and things there. Now, once you get in some of those religions, all bets are off as far as similarity. But the major world religions, and for instance, Confucianism, not a religion, right? Not a religion because there's no deity. But I've read a couple of books about it, and it's just like reading Jane the Moral Tenets. It's all about doing the right thing. It's every bit about trying to do the right thing. So it's almost identical. And what you find that's different is, remember we went through that flowways and mores and that business. Those things, mores and flowways, totally different. What you do with treat at a table, how you treat your food at a table, which food you eat, those are totally different. But those are the lower level 2 tiers. When you get up to taboos, and even some of those are different in some of these animist religions and things, they allow things that none of the major religions or philosophical tenets would allow on the things. That answer your question, Dick?
Well, Rocky, I'm thinking about all the traveling that you've done, and you need to me, have an education about the people that these countries that you're traveling to, so you're not judgmental. And, people in our country, or we all tend to be judgmental of, that's not right because that's what I was taught. And when you come down to it, if that's what they were taught and they believe, then you accept that. Am I correct? Or
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I don't know if you're correct, but I agree with you. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. You understand the point I'm making. I've lived 5 or 6 different countries. And before you go, one of the things you always do is study the culture. So you don't step in it by your own personal actions based on their culture, because you're living in their place now. And you don't have a right to expect them to adapt to, this is the world according to me. You don't have a right to expect them adapt to you and your way of life, because you're in their country and their culture. So you should do your best. There's something you don't like, don't get yourself in that situation where you'd be caught up in a scenario that you don't want to be in. So learn how to avoid that and do the thing. So yeah, I mean, in China, I had 6 weeks course on how to not screw up inside the Chinese culture. Do that. So the answer to that's yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And some people do that. Some people, I tend to read massively about anywhere I'm going. It's especially if I'm going to live there. So, I don't know, anybody else?
I have one more comment. So I saw something for another program sometime, Rocky. These major religious movements and moral movements and things, if you get into the details of it, you discover it's also very similar. How does it rise to such schisms?
Because just like we have, how many different denominations of Protestantism are there in the US? No one knows, because there's, I mean, thousands, because each one of there's independent little churches in every town who do what? They break off because they didn't like the bread. I mean, honestly, the Greek Orthodox Church left the Catholic Church over what? Remember, anybody know? Why the Greek Orthodox Church is no longer in the Catholic Church? Leavened versus unleavened bread. Leavened versus unleavened bread. That's the whole reason they left. Because there's a big flap at the time over somebody used leavened bread for something. And somebody said, and then they got in this big flat and they said, we're out. Now, this happens in every, and the problem with religions are all about what? There's trying to nail down back to crap, but trying to nail down the difference between things that actually exist and what people believe. Once you get into something you believe, all bets are off, right? And then once you become a zealot, and that's not just for religion, that's for any cause, any activity. Once you get to be a zealot, how do you change that person? Not happening. Not happening. So that's where these fights and things come from, because you get zealots inside any organization, religious mostly is where we think of that, but it's lots of other organizations too. Somebody who's committed to a particular thing, has the strongest personality in the room, organizes their friends and said, let's get out of here. These guys are crazy.
Well, it sort of reminds me of what they used to say about academic fights. So they're so vicious because the stakes are so small.
Right, exactly. That's a good statement. When I did all this reading, I mean, you can't, it's nailing jello to the wall, as we used to say. You know, you can't do it. There's no consensus. There's no idea. And religions are particularly that way because they're all beliefs. Most of them, they're all based on belief. And how do you? And you just can't. You don't necessarily want to change somebody. But there's people, part of these tenets, it's just like we said about particular verses inside certain religions, Christianity being one, is another where we have the most experience is people pick out certain tenets or certain scriptures or phrases or things, build their whole religion on that. It can be eliminate every other religion in the world. And the Christians thought that, and they tried to do that. And the Muslims, still some Christians. And so they believe in there, they pull out a couple verses and it says, you need to wipe everybody out. What? Man, woman, child, dog, drink. That's what it says in the Bible. Wipe them out. You know that, right? It says that's what you're supposed to do to non-Christian people. You're supposed to go in and wipe them out. Man, woman, child, dogs, things. Don't leave a living thing. So that's how it comes about. Again, this is all the world according to me. So don't quote, don't pass this on as a fact.
We have anything else?
In my small opinion, young people are not going to churches. They seem to be falling off. And I don't understand why. But I don't know if it's because I have lots of questions in my mind as to why they have so much involvement with other things, or maybe the internet causing it, or, what is causing our young people not to go to church?
Boy. Well, I think a lot of it is because most of the people, it's like a lot of other organizations in the world, most of the people who run churches are old. So they don't empathize, they can't connect with the young people. And they have their own ideas of how things should be. We've had 2,000 years of this is the way it is. This is how you conduct. This is how you have to go to church. Well, no, you don't. And so leadership fails to adjust. This, again, world according to me. I'll give you an example. One church I was in, started praise service. We went from, I told Tom, I started with 20 people in our first service, and 2 months later, we had 200. Because nobody else in town was doing one at the time. Rock and roll, hardcore rock and roll, not folk, this was a hardcore rock and roll. Went from 20 to 200. When we started, we had 6 people in our youth program. At the end of 2 months, we had 35 new ones. Were not in the church before. They were with their parents who came for the music. And then we hired a youth pastor who had hair down to here. And you think how hard that would be to do. This is back at to get the church council to hire this guy. He just graduated from college as a music major. Played guitar and had an opera singer voice. Hated opera, loved rock and roll, and had hair down to here. And somehow they convinced the church council to hire this guy. And that's how we got to 40 kids. Because when he got them into church, what did he tell them about church? Until when? 2, 3, 4 weeks down, then they'd be somewhere watching him playing games at his house, and up would come a 2-minute video with a lesson. Then he'd slip another one in, and then he'd slip another one in. And so they would be there every week to hang out and do the things, and they would get their 3-minute dose of religion sometime during that 1 hour period when they show up. And that was all because he knew reach them. We didn't. And we were lucky enough to have a group that would allow him the freedom to do things his way, not the way. Well, when are they going to study the scriptures? That's the question, right? When are they going to get serious?
You're saying we need to maybe change up your teaching method to today's time.
Yeah, I think, it's just, we are all totally uncomfortable in their world. I mean, I'm speaking for all of it, but I mean, I think we're totally uncomfortable operating in young person's world. And they what? Totally uncomfortable operating in ours. So we have this massive disconnect into the thing. And it's a hard thing to do, to make decisions because of all this stuff we've been talking about, how you build up your own mind. How long have we been doing that, building up our mind? A lot longer than them, right? So how strong are these tenets and comments and things in us? Really, really strong. How about them? Not so much. They're more situational ethics. I mean, honestly, they're more in the now. We're not in the now. So it's really, really hard. But I think to get kids in church, you have to have events that are not church. And then you slip the church to them when they're in the peanut butter like you do your dog. You get them in there, you feed them, you do the thing, and then you slip them that. And then you keep trying to increase the dose. And it worked. It worked in the one church until what? Until a much larger church watched this guy work and said, "We'll give you 3 times what you're making there to come to our church." So what's he going to do as a 23-year-old kid then? It's going to go make 3 times as much money, and away he went. And what did we do? Screwed it up. Yeah, we screwed it up and hired a 45-year-old youth pastor. 6 months later, we have 10 in the youth program. So a lot of it was locking of the draw and finding this one person and doing the things. But you can see what happens when you find a person like that and what they can do, what one person can do in a church. If you let them go a little bit and don't put your beliefs and conscience and mores onto them. And if they're all hanging out for 3 hours and there's not one word of church spoken, you think you're not getting your money's worth for what you're paying this guy, you know? And you are, because you've got these kids hanging out with a guy who's what? A youth pastor. I mean, that's what he is. And they know, where are you going? I'm going to the pastors. That's what they say, you know?
Used to have boys that fit the youth in school.
Yeah.
Organizations where kids would, that can't be. in school.
Oh, no. Now,
Any more questions? Any more comments? Rocky Roland, thanks again
All
for
right,
another
thanks,
delightful
guys.
presentation. We hope to see you again.